Good people, if you ever find yourself in need of an extra cheese grater for the kitchen, look no further. Oh, a hundo P this will work. Yeah, but to give Phanteks credit, this thing is smooth. She's smooth! But my gosh, the new Phanteks Shift XT is pretty awesome with this unmistakable evolved design with all the lines, the beautiful ventilation pattern, the 2.5mm aluminum shell that is sandblasted for proper fingerprint bounce, and the two color options for some variety. As always, there are plenty of clever features to turn this basic dual chamber ITX layout into something more Phanteks. The Shift XT is all about options. Basic ITX specs aside, we have 3 size configurations that require simple input from the user to raise the top of the shell to make room for a set of fans, known as the air boost mode, or install a 240 rad in there for the water cooling mode. The case of course gets bigger in volume, but that's what makes the XT so special. In the smallest compact form, it's absolutely tiny next to non-towering cases, and while I think it would have looked pretty awesome standing up, that's not possible because of the rear-facing motherboard. But even in its smallest form, CPU coolers up to 72mm are supported alongside an SFX or an SFX-L power supply, and of course a 3-slot GPU with enough length to fit my largest card on hand. So this being a Phanteks enclosure, there are plenty of cool features like this infinity mirror at the front with digital RGB illumination, or as I like to call it, DIRGB, that you can either control with the button on the case or connect to a 5-volt header. They've always done a great job with case lighting, and this is both ambient, beautiful, and is my favorite implementation so far. The riser cable is full speed Gen 4, that's the only option, with a stiffer housing to prevent too much bending, but now with this riser cable lock clip that attaches to both the motherboard and the riser and will stay in place unless you intentionally want to remove it. So the riser is now being held by both the PCI slot clip and this additional lock clip on the opposite side. You can also unscrew the riser cable behind the motherboard to access the backplate of your cooler without needing to take out the whole thing apart. The porosity of the side metal mesh is 35%, which is very good, only 5% less than the O11 Air Mini by Li, so it helps with dust filtration and also airflow. And I'm told by Phanteks that over 70% of you are not subscribed, so you probably did not see this sponsored transition coming. I am so jealous of all who have access to Micro Center. Are you kidding me? They have everything to get you in the mood. Laptops for days for Eber, in-stock hardware components. I mean, wow. And all types of gaming goodies for you know who. People call it tech heaven, but you don't gotta die to visit one. Go on a Thursday, for example. Prices are always competitive, and I'm told they have over 30,000 items in stock, and I call that confidence. New customers get a free SSD, growing some market share, I see. Check out Micro Center down below. Alright, so this whole size reconfiguration is insanely simple. You only need to work with the top panel. At the front, we have 3 positions for the standoff screw. This elevates the top panel in the compact or air boosted or the water cooling mode. A small screwdriver is included to help you swap the location of the 2 screws. And then for the back, we have these plastic covers that need to be installed for the air boost or the tallest mode only. Very simple and quick to do. And accessing the interior has a few steps. The front panel is magnetic and pulls off. Then these dual clips release the top panel that shifts forward and up. Then you can slide up the metal mesh on each side and remove the single thumb screw at the back that holds the entire steel frame to the bottom shell. And this way you can basically work with the entire frame with less weight to deal with. And also the front bracket opens like this from the top and can be removed. The whole process is totally acceptable for ITX enthusiasts, but I'll cover some hiccups later. The only storage option is the SSD caddy below the GPU. I mean, it's at least something and should be easy to cable manage, and there is no additional storage potential with the expansion of that top cover. Now, some additional accessories aside from the plastic covers and the screwdriver include these triple dust filter strips that perhaps might be useful for the top panel if you're setting this thing for intake, but they are adhesive because aluminum is not magnetic, so they are kind of a permanent solution mount. Plus we have the Phanteks metal square logo as the laser edged branding is hardly visible at the front, which I actually don't mind. And this brings me to some annoying things about the Shift XT that we need to talk about, okay? So the bottom front panel slides up to reveal our case I/O, which is a neat concept, but it requires strength of both thumbs, and the power button is right in the center, so it's really easy to just turn off your system when you try to slide up the door and access the ports, which only have one USB-A port despite the chunky 19-pin cable that you need to connect to the motherboard. And I always love me a full speed USB-C Gen 2 port, but the internal cable was 1 centimeter too short to reach the intended area on my motherboard, and that is not okay. Cable management to the most part is fine, but I use their new SFX power supply, which has really stiff cables that makes it really annoying to work with. And even though we have this large cutout in the center wall for your PCIe power cables, there is no fan guard included, so you really need to make sure that nothing is poking beyond the fan bracket. This Velcro strap is available here and it helps a bit, but it's only secured on the one side and it's pretty useless with really stiff cables. And since the metal mesh slides down, you have some guidance on how far the cables can protrude in the motherboard chamber. Otherwise, the filter will not fit. Also, because we don't have clear access to the bottom chamber when the bottom shell is installed, and if some cables are sticking out in that area and you try to slide the filter into it, it's just gonna be hitting those cables. So I had to disassemble the whole thing, push those cables in, and that's a little bit annoying. But the biggest disappointment for me is the GPU chamber and how poorly ventilated it is, despite thinking that it will be very well ventilated because of the large ventilation pattern and of course that really high porosity mesh panel. So when we look at the temperatures, they're not good. Even after removing the metal mesh filters, it feels like the thick aluminum exterior panels are not friendly to airflow, as temperatures absolutely drop once I take off the top shell. But of course, this is not a suitable, usable configuration. So let's boost some air with 2 exhaust fans that significantly improve cooling. And if you are air cooling, exhausting with the top fans is the way to go. Intake just makes things worse. But in reality, the best cooling performance is achieved with a 240 all-in-one cooler set to exhaust, making our GPU extremely happy. And of course, it's much more capable for my 5 GHz overclock than the low profile Noctua cooler. The biggest surprise for me is just how poorly ventilated the GPU chamber is by default. So while the compact mode looks really cool, no way should you run it with a non-blower style GPU in there. Comparing against my ITX stack for CPU cooling, it's exactly what I was expecting with a 240 AIO in there, but it quickly turns up the heat if you're relying on the best low profile cooler on the market. While on the GPU side, you absolutely need some help with exhaust to remove the trapped heat from the GPU chamber, and with an all-in-one cooler, it's right in the middle of the chart and very similar performance with the 2 exhaust fans when air cooling. But this is definitely something to keep in mind when deciding on your cooling configuration and hardware, because the L12S cooler performs the best with the fan set to intake, but that also dumps a lot of the heat into the chassis and also heats up the chamber, the GPU chamber as well. Luckily, expanding the top half of the case is simple. It doesn't feel like a compromise and it still looks great, but I feel like the design of the exterior shell leaves room for future iterations that might improve on airflow performance with more open panels. At $169, I say it's still competitive because of the Gen 4 riser cable, premium materials, the design of this shrunken Evolve case, and the 3 optional modes. The closest competitor would be the Meshalicious, but with an even smaller footprint, more power supply options, better storage, and better cooling performance out of the box. Although I do love the design of the XT much more, and I wish that it could be made to work in the tower form factor because it absolutely looks fantastic. So if you are building an ITX system soon, let me know if this thing will be on your mind. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you in the next video.